a bit. Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Smith, Chair of the TCHC Board's Governance, Communications, and Human Resources Committee. Welcome to the public session of today's committee meeting. In the light of the need for social distancing to limit the spread of COVID-19, we're holding this committee meeting virtually. Let me first begin with an acknowledgement that the land each of us is on as we hold this virtual meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. There are no decisions to report out on the in-camera session at this moment. We'll proceed with the public session. And during the public session, the committee has before it the 2021 Public Governance, Communications, and Human Resources Work Plan for approval. First of all, though, I'd like to mention and draw everyone's attention and express my appreciation to the staff, because working in this under COVID-19 is been very challenging, and the staff, I think, has been doing an excellent job in responding to the needs of tenants as well as the concerns for safety for both the tenants and themselves. GCHC's COVID-19 response is now in its 11th month. GCHC staff have been working tirelessly with the city, with healthcare providers, and with community partners to bring testing closer to tenants' homes, including door-to-door testing in buildings with high populations of vulnerable and isolated tenants. Targeted outreach tailored to the community's specific needs. Our staff are educating tenants about how they can get tested and the available support to help them in self-isolation safely. Many of our communities are among the hardest hit by the virus, and I'm proud of how our employees have stepped up to support tenants who are self-isolating and help agencies deliver food and other essentials to seniors and vulnerable tenants. And I want to thank everyone at the company for setting a good example by following public health advice at work and at home. In doing so, you are protecting your co-workers, your families, our tenants, and folks in our city who are the most vulnerable to the effects of COVID-19. Your efforts are truly appreciated by all of us. That concludes my opening remarks, and I thank you for your listening to those remarks and our sincere appreciation to the work of the staff. We have following requests from members of the public to make deputations at this morning's meeting, and we actually, I believe, have 3 of the requests for deputations. They're actually all by the same individual, Cheryl Dugan, and I'm asking Cheryl if she is online, that she may make her deputations, all 3 deputations at the same time, to use our time the most efficiently. And Cheryl, if you're there.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. So please.
And that sounds like a deal to me.
please proceed, and people can take notes and ask questions after you've completed all three.
Okay, all right. We'll start off with 2D, the 2021 GCHRC work plan. The one thing that stood out most to me on this was 19 CC 5.2, TCHC's medical and safety at risk priority transfer process for tenants. Official status is work completed, but I believe this needs some tweaking as tenant discussions with TCHC's Confronting Anti-Black Racism team have highlighted some issues. The medical and safety at risk priority transfer process should include an element of agency on the part of the tenant. At no point should a tenant have to choose between a rock and a hard place. Leaving a space of domestic violence in order to reside in a space of excessive community violence is unfathomable. Give the tenants on the safety at risk priority list the right to choose 3 communities with appropriately sized units, then place them in one of those communities they chose. If they decline a unit in a community of their choice, then obviously the priority wasn't that great to begin with, and TCHC can offer units to the next tenants on whatever list. There were some concerns raised in the CABR discussions that TCHC was using the safety at risk transfer process to fill units in undesirable high crime locations. So that was it for 2D.
Okay.
For number 3, I'm not going to be as light on you. This one's a little heavier. Okay, this one is referring to the open meeting requirements. And I noticed that according to the City of Toronto's website, the city takes a number of steps to ensure the highest degree of openness and transparency. And I get that most of that has to do with these in-camera sessions you guys have that seem to run really, really late. Anyways, given that explanation and my recent experience, I would argue that the process for open meeting requirements extend well beyond what is broadly alluded to under the description section of this GCHC chart provided. Let's use this meeting as an example, 20 minutes to discuss governance, communication, and human resources. On what planet do you believe that is enough time to discuss one of these issues, never mind all 3? For example, governance, there is a recruitment process going on to replace our CEO as well as other board positions, including 2 tenant board seats. How is this process moving along? How many people have applied for each position? What step of the process are they in? What is the time frame for final decision? Just because this process is handled by the city doesn't mean that TCHC shouldn't be aware of what stage they're at and accompanying deadlines. Communications. During this pandemic, I'd like to know that what TCHC's plans are to combat the lack of preventative measures that occur in our TCHC communities. Communication should be a front line in this war on COVID. Sending out notices to cleaning staff not to clean high-touch areas with dirty rags would be a prime example. Besides that, what are staff instructed to do if they witness clear violations, i.e. someone not wearing a mask or 4 people crammed into one elevator that don't live in the same unit? On the other hand, can't communications open up a tenant leader communication channel? We are so isolated right now. Any opportunity to talk to other tenants would be appreciated. Now, when it comes to dealing with communications among committee and board members, why do TCHC board and committee members spend so much time reading through reports during meetings? That leads me to believe that there are members that are not otherwise prepared for their meetings. If there are concerns about board and committee meetings not being prepared for meetings, facilitating or enabling that lack of preparation is not an appropriate tactic. Discipline is. Is there a reason that TCHC committee and board members can't forward questions or comments to those submitting reports to meetings prior to said meetings? That way, those issues could be at an advanced stage of discussion prior to and post board and committee meetings. Human resources. What new hires have taken place? How many staff have left? Did they resign or were they quote unquote let go? Are the new hiring resource practices and protocols having this desired impact? When will a new staff survey be designed and distributed? As you can see, that's far more representative of what should be addressed within the GCHRC meeting with the current agenda framing and or following these categories. Now that we discuss the actual posting of now we can actually discuss the posting of the TCHC's agenda, the agenda on the TCHC's website. During one of the two tenants for city hosted virtual discussions about the expectations of tenant board members, Linda Jackson stated that TCHC does its best to post the agendas 10 days prior to a committee or board meeting. Now, is that 10 regular days or 10 business days? Otherwise, that's far from reality in my experience as the TCHC tenant advocate and deputant. Let's take this meeting for an example. The agenda was not posted until Tuesday, January 26, 2021. That's 6 days before the actual meeting. Now, as a tenant advocate, I don't appreciate the deadline of noon Friday, January 29th, as the cutoff time for me to declare that I plan to verbally depute. Alternatively, if I plan to just submit written deputations, those would have been due by the Friday deadline as well. And just in case you're under the impression I have nothing better to do than wait for TCHC to post agendas, during the last week, I've had 3 food delivery days with overlapping distribution days for the food bank I coordinate for seniors and vulnerable tenants in my building. And recently, I worked with Sandy Fong, the board secretary, to have written deputations submitted late, as I otherwise could not meet the deadline of submitting on a Friday for a Monday Tenant Services Committee meeting. That was in January. I had hoped to verbally depute on an item at last Monday's TSC meeting, but was informed that they were only taking verbal deputations on item number 4. I was informed that they would not hear my deputation on the agenda itself. Forgive me for saying so, but if they were still willing to entertain deputations on item number 4, then why not on the agenda, especially when it highlighted that lack of cohesive, comprehensive COVID-19 action plan for tenants across the entire portfolio. There has never been a mandate to prevent someone from deputing on the agenda despite previous attempts by TCHC to limit deputations. Then there's the fact that once a deputant is finished giving their deputation, there are no follow-up questions or comments from board or committee members in order to fully understand an issue that a deputant has brought to their attention. Just a click, then a dial tone. I've watched city council meetings. I know that they have made allowances to accommodate this much needed for clarification. I would rather like to know that I have A, been heard, B, understood, and C, asked what solutions I could envision for moving beyond the issue raised. Then there's the idea that most organizations have some time allotted at the end of the agenda for other business. Never have I seen this on a TCHC committee or board agenda. It may be on the in-camera session agendas, I don't know, but I do know that other business does not appear on TCHC committee or public board members' board agendas. On the odd occasion that TCHC may be doing something right, wouldn't you like to hear about that? On the odd occasion that someone may have an idea about how to govern, communicate, or resource staff more effectively, wouldn't you like to hear about that as well? Frame it as a positive reinforcement or solution channel where tenants or the general public can offer their real-time advice on issues affecting them. Because let's face it, any issues discussed at this meeting take years from problem to consultation to solution. If we could trim some of that time, we trim some of the resistance and some of the expense. In other words, TCHD needs to look at ways to further examine their open meeting requirements well beyond the definition given and the March 31st, 2021 deadline provided. Okay, now we're on to item number 4. Everybody still awake?
Brian.
Sorry.
No, just go,
Mr. Campbell,
no, just
Yes, go ahead, John. I was muted. I think you're muted.
Right. I just muted myself by accident. Before she goes on to the next point, could I just ask her a question about the points that she just made on that last one?
Sure.
Yes. So on the corporation's COVID preparedness,
yep.
Have you written to anyone at the organization to get an understanding of what steps have been taken?
You would think that as a tenant rep in my community, as someone who's actually, you know, the frontline, pretty much frontline staff, that, you know, I would have heard something, and I really haven't. I think it's like hit and miss. I think a lot of it is, and I heard about one community not far from mine. I'm not sure where out here in Scarborough. I don't have the exact location, but I heard that all the office staff ended up with COVID, and half the tenants in the building ended up with it. So it's, you know, whatever they're doing, I don't think it's enough.
So no, my question was, you know, perhaps it would be worthwhile to perhaps send a note to the CEO, and he can have staff put together some information to address your specific concerns or questions.
Oh, he's actually sent me back an email saying that they were looking into the stickers for our doors, but that's all I've gotten feedback on. And I just, with the Tenant Services Committee meeting that was last week, I sent them in a 2-page deputation on the COVID measures and what I think should be in place. And the only thing I've heard back on is the mask issue, and it's like it's not even enough.
The other thing I would just say is that you made a statement that committee members and board members are seen to be reading reports during meetings.
Yeah.
I don't know why you would assume that the reports have not necessarily been read, because oftentimes we have to make reference to the reports that are in front of us. And now in this virtual situation, I'm looking at a laptop, but up here are my board documents to which I refer. So I would just suggest that, and I know I'm supposed to be asking a question. So the question is, why would you assume that the materials have not previously been covered off by committee and board members?
Partly to do with questions asked, and sometimes the questions not asked.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's fine. I would just suggest, Brian, if you'll give me the liberty just to offer a suggestion, is that if you have a specific question that you feel is not being addressed, the best way is to forward it to the CEO or the COO, and they will then, rather than assume that that will come from a deputation, a direct question by email, in all likelihood, I would think would get a proper and fulsome response.
I've done that before, and it's not as wholesome as you'd expect.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Those are my questions.
That's all right. Okay. Thank you.
So please continue.
All right. So we're on to item number 4, and on this one, I take issue with the wording for City Council direction regarding board attention. Should that not say City Council direction requiring board attention? And now I also take issue with the concept of City Council directing TCHC on various matters. What would it take to turn TCHC into a self-directed corporation? Because I'm certain no other corporation, quote unquote, is directed by outside entities. Besides, any initiative that the city finds success with takes years for TCHC to integrate into their policies and programs. And a prime example of that is the Confronting Anti-Black Racism plan that was unanimously adopted by City Council in December of 2017, making its appearance on TCHC agendas in 2020. The next issue that I could use some clarification on is the AGM process. Now, I understand that TCHC can't vote on new members at the AGMs. That's fine. But why can't the city and TCHC agree to announce new board members at the AGM? Given that this year's AGM is likely to be virtual, it would make sense to try out this new format. In addition, TCHC could put out a press release related to the consolidated event with details about the AGM and introduce the new board members. And then there are categories without definitions like quote unquote special items. May I suggest COVID management be listed? That should be something that all three sections, governance, communications, and human resources of this committee are accountable for. I can pretty much guarantee COVID-19 will be an issue until at least the fourth quarter of 2021 for both TCHC staff and tenants. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Are there other questions that board members would like to make. I guess your one comment that I would say is that we are, the city is the sole shareholder of GCHC, and we're under their direction. And as long as the city wishes, we need to abide by that direction. So, I mean, I take your point that obviously there are other models out there, but this is the city's decision, and that's their prerogative. You know, I don't think, you know, as much as many of us might like to debate that issue, that's the reality. Are there other questions that any board member would like to ask Cheryl? Hearing none. Thank you, Cheryl, very much for
Thank you.
your comments, and I appreciate your very thoughtful into the process. In keeping with the practices adopted by the City of Toronto, we will, in the absence of a request from a committee member, conduct votes by way of a show of hands. To assist in this process, we would ask all committee members to ensure that their cameras are on and request staff participating in the meeting to ensure that their cameras are turned off during the voting process. Should a committee member request that we do so, we will vote on items as required using a voice vote, in which I will ask committee members individually to indicate whether they either support or oppose the recommendation that is before the committee by indicated whether they approve or oppose the recommendation. Item 2A, approval of the agenda and review of agenda order. I will now review the public consent agenda items and the public regard agenda items as listed on the agenda. If there's a motion to accept the consent agenda. John, seconded by Uba. Thank you very much. Are there any other requests for in addition to the regular agenda items for other business? Hearing none, I will ask that the board approve the agenda as circulated. John, seconded by Paula or Uba. Okay, thank you. Are there any, if the board would, members would, of the governance committee, indicate any agenda item in which they have a conflict of interest together with the nature of that conflict? If there are any conflicts, please indicate. Hearing none, no conflicts of interest were declared for any of the agenda items. Can I please have a motion to approve? Well, I think we've done that, the public consent agenda. Thank you. Business arising from the public meeting minutes and action items. Item 3 is the business arising from the public meeting minutes and action items. An update which is forward to the committee for committee's information. Are there any questions arising out of the action items update?
No, I don't have no questions.
If there are none, then can I please have a motion to receive the action items update? Motion by John, seconded by Paula. All those in favor? Motion carried. Item 4 is the 2021 Public Governance, Communication, Human Resource Committee Work Plan Report, which is in front of you for the committee's information. If the committee has any questions of staff regarding matters addressed in the report. Are there any questions with regards?
No questions.
Pardon?
No questions for me.
Any questions? Can I please have a motion to approve the 2021 Public Governance, Communication, Human Resource Committee Work Plan as set out in attachment 1 of the report? Moved by Paula, seconded by Uba. All those in favor? Motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I believe that concludes our business.
Yes. Well, I ask you if there is any other business that any board committee member wants to raise. Hearing none, can I please have a motion to terminate the public meeting?
So moved.
By John, seconded by Paula. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you for attending today's meeting, and I appreciate your attention and involvement. And I'll look forward to the next meeting, which I believe is in March.
Thank you, Mr.
Hey,
Chair.
everyone. Have a safe day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.